Isaias Hernandez.
And I'm Kat Superfisky.
And we're teaching climate together. I'm delighted to be joined by world-renowned urban ecologist Kat Superfisky. Today we're talking here in Elysian Park in Los Angeles to learn more about the urban ecology landscape about this beautiful environment.
Yeah, and so here in Los Angeles, we are a mega city. We're the actually second largest city in the country, but one of the mega cities in the world. And when people think of LA, they normally think of Hollywood, they think of the glitz and the glamour and kind of the built environment. But today I'm really excited to kind of peel back those layers of concrete, steel, and infrastructure and really get us to put on our nature goggles and see the city beyond just us, but be thinking about, again, the ecosystems and the plants and animal communities that are also living here. Most people don't think of rivers when they think of Los Angeles, but we actually have a 51-mile-long river that cuts through the center of not only the city of Los Angeles, but of our entire greater LA region. And it actually is the reason that we have such a dense population of people living here now. It's because when the settlers were coming across the country and they were coming to try to establish El Pueblo here, they figured out, oh, we've got a source of water, we've got a source of food, and unfortunately they found a source of slavery in the indigenous people who were living along the banks of the river. So they decided to build our city here inland instead of a lot of giant cities across the country and the world that you think of, which are on coasts. You think of San Francisco, you think of Seattle, you think of Boston, New York. They're on the coasts of areas, right? Well, why didn't Santa Monica or Long Beach grow up into our biggest urban area here? Why is it that our downtown is inland? It's because of the Los Angeles River. It's because of these ecological and natural resources that we historically have had here and that we still do have here. But again, they're just a little bit paved over and a little bit covered up.
Yeah, and I mean, like, just looking all around here in Los Angeles, like, I see a lot of cars, I see pavement, I see a few trees, I see a lot of dried up bushes from, of course, wildfire season, and I feel like there's often this misconception that Los Angeles has dried up and there's no species left here, which is simply untrue.
Yep, exactly. And I would actually love to read a little excerpt from the missionaries who came over, of that it was authored exactly in this location that we're standing here back in the 1700s. And when we hear what it was that they were writing about, it's, I think, a little bit different than what we'll see when we turn around and actually look at the landscape that's around us now.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's get out this old diary here. So this was authored on actually August 2nd of 1769, so over 250 years ago. So it says, "We set out from the valley in the morning and followed the same plain in the westerly direction. After traveling about 1.5 leagues through a pass between low hills, we entered a very spacious valley, well grown with cottonwoods and alders, among which ran a beautiful river. Towards the north-northeast, there is another riverbed, which forms a spacious watercourse, but we found it dry. This bed unites with that of the river, giving a clear indication of great floods in the rainy season, for we saw it had many trunks of trees on the banks. This plain where the river runs is very extensive. It has good land for planting all kinds of grain and seeds, and is the most suitable site of all that we have seen for a mission, for it has all the requisites for a large settlement." A very large settlement indeed, right?
Yeah.
So again, we were hearing things about alders, about cottonwoods, about these free-flowing rivers. Do you see any alders?
No, I don't.
Do you see any cottonwoods?
No.
Can you spot a free-flowing river here? And we've taken these kind of natural features in our landscape and we very much converted them into infrastructural features, but those natural features still exist in a place like Los Angeles. And again, is the reason that we're all here.
So there's been massive amounts of ecological disturbance that has happened for the development of urbanization, but at the same time, we could still find those species interacting, and it seems that we want to really unpack those ecologies.
Yep, exactly. And that's what my role as an urban ecologist really is coming into spaces like Los Angeles and figuring out, how do we look at what we've got right now, which again is a lot of development and a lot of us as humans, but we're an animal, so we're one of those species, and how then can we more mindfully integrate in kind of a symbiotic city with plants and animals? And that's, again, the great job that I get to have of saying, what do we already have that is existing and hanging on here, like the river, like our mountains, like our coastlines, like a lot of actual great resources in the basin even? How do we enhance those And how do then we invite more nature into a space like this? Because as so many of us know, that brings us so much health and happiness as well.
Yeah. I'd love to learn more about what is your relationship to urban ecology and what got you here to Los Angeles doing work in the LA River.
That is a great question, because I will say that if you would have asked me, a decade ago, if I would be seeing myself living in a place like Los Angeles, I would have said, heck no. LA is so well known.
It is.
But again, it's well known for these things that are non-nature-esque. And I actually learned about LA as kind of a case study of the non-nature-esque. Oh, this is what you maybe don't want to do in planning and design. And I wanted to come to a place like this to prove, no, there's awesome nature that's already here in a place like Los Angeles. And there's so much more nature that could be here. And how do we actually do that? And if we can figure it out in a place like LA, then man, we could figure it out anywhere. So yeah, the more that we can, again, get people to see all of the different parts of a place like Los Angeles and to be really able to appreciate that urban wild or the urban nature or the urban ecology that we talk about, that is really, I think, the future of addressing climate change. Because if we really get it right in places like Los Angeles and in these kind of city spaces, again, these are some of the biggest land areas. You can fit so many different Yosemite National Parks in the greater Los Angeles area.
I didn't think
it's
of it
about,
that way.
I think I did a scale calculation once, and it's like 13 different national park of the Yosemite size could fit within here. And we, again, think of Yosemite as this great treasure. Well, what if we, again, thought of Los Angeles as a 13 times treasure of that and really treated it as such? How much we could actually benefit as humans from that kind of ecosystem.
And what you're saying here is it's valuing true ecological wealth rather than this financial capital wealth of what these resources are bringing, because nature itself cannot be privatized. It should not be. It should actually be all for everyone, for all species, because this is our home together.
Yep. I'm a huge believer that nature is a human right, and that we need to have access for everybody to be able to, experience the joys and, again, the health benefits that come from it.
Now we're here in another level of Elysian Park, and you told me about putting on your nature goggles. So I usually have my city goggles on. I'm looking, I just see a tree, which I don't know what species it is. I see, some trees over there, the freeway, and then a little path. But if you put your nature goggles on, like you were telling me, I tend to kind of start asking questions like, what species is this? Why is this a mountainous region? What is that mountain back over there? How does this connect to corridors and wildlife species? So can you tell me more about nature goggles?
Yeah, it's actually a really fun game that I love to play all the time, and I really encourage other people to be able to toggle between what we visually see first, which again, you mentioned are kind of the cityscape infrastructure. So we are seeing even like housing developments and things like that. I'm seeing a neighborhood. I'm seeing infrastructure like the electrical power lines, like rail corridors. If we, again, peel back that concrete, steel, and infrastructure, you're seeing that we're standing up on a high point, right? We're a lot higher than the freeway and then those neighboring, residential communities. And we can also then see kind of these other large mountainous areas. So we're looking at actually the easternmost terminus of the Santa Monica Mountain Range, which in that case is Griffith Park, a city-owned park. And then on a clearer day, you could also see the surrounding mountains too of the San Gabriels, then blending into the San Bernardino Mountains. All of those mountain ranges together make up the transverse ranges. And that's actually a really unique characteristic that we have landform-wise here in the greater LA area. If you think of a lot of mountain ranges across the country, you're thinking of the Rocky Mountains, you're thinking of the Sierra Nevada Mountains, you're thinking of the Appalachian Mountains.
Yeah.
Those are all north-south oriented, right? Those mountain ranges go from the north to the south. Here, we're standing looking north, and these mountain ranges are all perpendicular to that. They're running east and west. And so we like to do things in LA a little bit differently, per usual.
Yeah.
Nature's the same way. It crumpled our mountains to be east-west orientation, and so that provides these amazing microclimates within a very small, compacted place like Los Angeles that creates then a diversity of different opportunities for tons of different plants and animals to live in. So this topography that we're standing on and that we're surrounded by is really bringing a lot of, again, the nature and the lifeblood to a place like Los Angeles. If you think about if a droplet of water was to fall on any one of these hillsides, what would happen to it? Where would it end up going?
Flooding down.
It flows downhill, right?
Yeah.
So we also can not only recognize the mountain areas, but the mountains are still informing where the water is flowing in a place like LA, and it's all flowing to that low point. You can actually see the LA River and then the floodplains of the LA River around it. We've since built into those areas and converted them into our neighborhoods because it was a little bit easier to build on flat land, but we still have a floodplain because we still have a river. So we still have those kind of natural features. It's just, again, that we've kind of come in as a human species and decided to build on top of and or around these things. But the place that really brings nature and the elements that really bring nature are still here. And so if, again, you just flip off your city goggles, you can still recognize the topography that's surrounding you at all times. You can recognize the waterways that might be around you at all times. You can recognize the plants and the animals that are around you all the time as well. So it's really a fun game, again, to switch in between those city goggles and then your nature goggles.
Yeah, and then, right now what we're seeing is LA is in a housing crisis, and that's been a major issue where the city keeps saying, well, where do we build more housing? And some of the most dangerous issues that we've seen with acceleration of climate disasters happening due to climate change is let's build on the mountains, which is something that is very terrible to do. And can you explain why it's terrible?
Yeah, well, if you think about it, a lot of our existing natural resources that are still hanging on that haven't yet been paved over, they are actually in our hillside communities. I mentioned that, again, we started building in the flatlands, and that's because, again, it was a lot easier for engineers and for designers to figure out how to construct something on a flat surface versus, and it again was a lot more affordable. Now that engineering has advanced a lot, now that people's incomes in certain areas are increasing, we're seeing the ability for us to develop up into these steeper hillside slopes. That then is impacting the plant communities that are still within those hillside habitats and the unique animal communities, like even the mountain lion that's still a resident of Los Angeles. We have mountain lions in a place like LA. We're one of two cities across the world that has a major cat living in it, like a mountain lion. It's us and it's Mumbai, and that's great. But when we then are developing into these areas, again, we're seeing that a lot of us bringing our habitat and our housing into it is cutting down things like oak trees. It's cutting down things like walnut trees. It's then not providing habitat for the animal species that have been historically existing here and need to exist here and need to be able to move in between and through a place like the city of Los Angeles.
So as you were saying that we have risk of losing species due to developing up here in the hills, I mean, just noting the fact that flora, fauna, fungi are all going to be affected. But one of the things that people don't know is California is a very rich ecosystem. It's known for its Mediterranean climate. So people come here and they flock here for the beaches, for the mountains, for the deserts. And this is what makes us such a unique ecosystem, yet a very highly vulnerable ecosystem that's due for exploitation and development here.
Yeah, and so really the important thing is to find that balance of being able to say, okay, well, we do want to come to these places as humans because we're recognizing that we love nature and that nature is in a place like LA. You mentioned all of these different experiences that we can have in the same day. We can go climb a mountain and then go surfing in the exact same day. Some of the highest elevation to the lowest that you see in a place like California, great. Yeah. But again, it comes at that delicate balance of we need to be mindful of how it is that we are developing in a place like Los Angeles so that we're not displacing plant and animal communities who have, again, been living here for eons and really, again, bring a lot of the life and what attracts people to a place like Los Angeles to the heart of the city here.
So now we're in the floodplain of the Los Angeles River. Now we're here and I want to learn more about the topography and what's been happening here.
Yeah, exactly. So again, this is a great part of the Los Angeles River to come to because we see an awesome juxtaposition between looking downstream, which are very concretized conditions, which is weird for a river to have, an encasement in concrete. And then if we look north, or upstream, we do actually see a fair amount of vegetation in this riparian ecosystem. So we're seeing a little bit of the history and then with a little bit of kind of present conditions. And so the question kind of is, well, why would we ever concretize a river? And why do you think? Why would we need to put a riparian ecosystem in a very defined channel. Do you know why it would be?
Well, for development, to prevent that flooding to getting into the homes of people.
You got it, exactly. So as we were mentioning at some of the other stops, we have developed the city of Los Angeles and the greater metropolitan area out from the river. And as we continued to develop and develop, we added more of us and our infrastructure to around this ecosystem. Now, riparian ecosystems in the south and in the southwest are different than East Coast rivers and riparian ecosystems in the sense that they dry up typically during the summer months. They're ephemeral. And so they dry up during the summer months, and then during the fall and winter, that's our rainy season. And that's then when these rushing torrents of water will come down and fill our waterways. So it's easy for then humans to forget during the summer that maybe they're building next to or alongside of a river when it's bone dry. So we again built up to the banks of the LA River. Then when the rainy season would come, it would end up impeding our development. We would wash away our rail lines, we'd wash away our transmission corridors, we'd wash away our houses. We were losing lives. So year after year in the early 19-teens as well as then 30s, we were seeing a lot of actually devastating floods. And a lot of devastation was happening to us and our human development here in LA. So the mayor of Los Angeles at the time, in about the 1930s, stood up for the city, called up the federal government and said, how can you all help us? We need, again, help here in Los Angeles. So in comes the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They model out a scenario of solutions for what we can do to preserve human life and development in a place like Los Angeles. And they figured out, aha, if we put the LA River in a concrete straitjacket, we know exactly where that line of water is going to be going, and we can then eliminate the flooding that happens on the banks of it. So we designed and engineered and then built a channelized waterway to make it safe for people like us to be inhabiting a place like Los Angeles. And so that's why you see the concrete that's here today. It's literally for providing an ecosystem service of flood attenuation and control for us to be able to inhabit a place like Los Angeles as well. But it's drastically altered the natural ecology of that riparian ecosystem.
And let's talk about like the depavement movement. So like a lot of critics say, well, we shouldn't even have built this in the first place because it destroyed a lot of ecological systems. But now what scientists and experts are saying is that if we remove the dams, that removes the environment of the animals that have already adapted to those ecosystems. It's so rich to see that unique species actually live in these environments.
Yeah, we are still seeing, again, a lot of nature being able to hang on in these places. And as you mentioned, a lot of plant and animal species are actually adapting to these kind of urban ecosystems. A great example that I like to bring up about how complicated it is to figure out what to do moving forward now that we have this channelized waterway, but we have the history of more of this riparian ecosystem. What do we do? Do we remove all of the concrete and take it back to historic times? It's a tough thing because not only would that inhibit our ability to inhabit places along the banks of the Los Angeles River, but it actually would impact some great bird species. There's a ton of migratory shorebird habitat that's down further in the South LA area. And literally, the reason that has become a stopover area for these migrating birds is because the LA River now is a year-round water source where it does not dry up during the summer because most of the water in the river is tertiary treated sewage water, meaning that it's what we flush or what we put down our drains gets treated 3 different times.
But clean.
Clean puts out into the LA River. And so it's actually just a titch below drinking water, but we allow that outflow to happen on a year-round basis. So we no longer have the water cycle of where it dries up during the summer months. So with that kind of contiguous water source and with it then thinly sheeting over top of the concrete, it provides the perfect conditions for algae to grow. So that's providing a water source and a food source for then these birds that are migrating down as part of the Pacific Flyway. They see that, they stop over, they've gotten used to using LA and the LA River as a key patch habitat. If we were to just restore this habitat and rewind back to what used to be, we would be, again, taking away that water source during the summer months. And we also would then be allowing those algae sources to dry up. And so there goes the food and there goes the water of these species that have adapted to that. So that's how difficult it is to figure out how to manage urban ecosystems, because again, if you pull at one little thread, you're then affecting a bunch of other stuff, and it might be beneficial, it might not be. It's always tough.
Which is why we need urban ecology, because it brings in all these different perspectives into policy making, which we'll get into future about why governmental changes is important to create systemic change.
Yep.
Now that we're here in the city, we talked a lot about corridors and connectivity for wildlife species to get around. Now, fun fact, a lot of animals get killed via freeway. So how do the animals get from there to over here?
Well, that's a really great question. And with us in our development, we actually have a lot of impediments in the way of making it easy for plants and animals to move around our city too. So if you kind of look back in this direction, you're seeing the hillsides and that topography and the landform that we started at up in Elysian Park. So that's again a great source and kind of patch habitat that a lot of animals and plants are living in. Now, the name of the game for a lot of especially large mammals is that they'd be looking out of a place like that, looking to then see on the horizon line, where are other areas that are hillsides and or mountainous? So if we look in that direction, we're then seeing other hillsides. So if you're living as an animal there, you again are going to want to somehow get over there. But we've built freeways and we've built roadways and we've built houses and residential places in between here and there. So this actually provides a window into an opportunity for animals, or an opportunity for us to redevelop to make it more inhabitable for animals. But if you can see right here, there's a notch and kind of a window. The freeway, the I-5 freeway, which runs right alongside of Elysian Park and fragments that landscape, there's an underpass that is actually an on-ramp to the freeway that technically, if a critter was ambitious enough, could figure out how to come down off the hillsides, use the underpass there, come out across Riverside onto a street like this, be able to then dead end into the LA River, find and use the LA River, and then traverse across it and get over to the surrounding hillside. So as an urban ecologist, I try to find those opportunity areas where, again, most people would just say, oh, this is an on-ramp, or this is an off-ramp, or this is a culvert. But for me, I'm like, that's an opportunity area. That's one area that is permeable for wildlife to be able to pass back and forth. And so how can we, again, make more of those and make these kind of things easier and more beneficial for wildlife to be able to move, so that they can actually have that large-scale landscape connectivity that they need for the genetic passing of their DNA, and for, again, the health of species in total, especially in these kind of urban conditions.
Okay, now we finally made it to the Los Angeles River, here, this beautiful river. Now, can you tell us more about the vegetation that's here, and is this water safe?
Yeah, for sure. So as we kind of mentioned earlier on in our saunter along the river, there is a very mixed bag of different types of plants that have found their way into this riparian ecosystem. Some of which are native to here, like the willow species and the trees that we're seeing that are very old growth, and they're providing a lot of great habitat value. And then we're seeing, again, a lot of, if we look down this direction, a lot of this dense thicket that is referred to as Arundodonax. That's the species name. It's a common reed. It looks a little bit like bamboo, but it's not. And it is actually a non-native and also invasive plant that has come into our waterways here in California. And it unfortunately has, again, negative impacts on the ecosystem. And as you can see, it just creates, as I mentioned, these dense thickets, which make it hard for different water courses to go through. It sucks up a lot of the water. It really changes the hydrology in an area, so on and so forth. So the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers actually comes in and actively manages the invasive species within the LA River. So if we look upstream here, oh, and you can see a white egret coming across right here. Gotta love that. Hey, buddy. A lot of the understory has been cleared out, right? We still see the willow trees that I mentioned are native to a riparian ecosystem like this. And then if we look downstream, this is kind of the cutoff point where the Army Corps has made it only thus far. And we still see then dense vegetation underneath those willow trees. And that's again the invasives that the Army Corps will eventually be coming through and actually removing. So it is very interesting that we're still trying to manage an ecosystem like this, and we're doing, what we can. Oh, and a bunch of blackneck stilts coming by here too. This is perfect. Love it. So you can see that again, the vegetation that's here is allowing a ton of different bird species and other kind of animals to actually be habiting these places as well, which is great.
And I think one of the things that you mentioned is that Army Corps is doing this project very slowly. Can you tell us how many years it takes for them? Because the LA River has existed for decades now.
Yeah, something like the invasive removal or control kind of efforts, they started a handful of years ago and kind of up in the northernmost aspect of the Glendale Narrows. And each year have kind of taken off a section of the river, a different reach, and have kind of paraded down so far as to here. So we've got just a hop, skip, and a jump down to where we started, which was the southernmost end of the Glendale Narrows. So the Army Corps has just a little bit more time to actually go through the remainder of this ecosystem. But there is a lot of talk about the fact that even though there are some invasive and non-native plants that are in this kind of stretch of the river, there is still some habitat value to that. And so there is still dialogue happening between people like the Army Corps of Engineers and the, residents of these riverside communities and things like that as to how much management we can and should be doing in these areas, because we want to make sure that, again, the animals that have found their way here are still able to exist in a place like the LA River, to where we're not managing it so much that we're denuding the landscape and totally changing the conditions. So it is a delicate balance between how it is that we're coming in and then managing these ecosystems.
Absolutely. And I think the general person that knows about the LA River, we've seen how the atmospheric rains have really affected it. There was a video back in January that showed the whole area was filled with water, and people were saying, what is happening? And a lot of the misconceptions that I've heard is that the LA River is very dirty and no one should bother to touch it.
And that's something where, yes, at times, but no, more often than not, it's actually pretty clean. So the water that we see rushing through the LA River on a daily basis is actually tertiary treated water. So anytime we're, again, flushing a toilet or we're, using a faucet, what's going down our drains then goes to water treatment plants. We then treat it 3 times, hence the term tertiary. So 1, 2, 3. It's then just a titch below drinking level quality, so pretty clean. And then it's let out into this ecosystem. And that's why, again, we have the constant stream of water, and why we don't see it be ephemeral like a normal ecosystem or a natural riparian ecosystem here. We have that constant flow because we're constantly flushing our toilets, and we're constantly treating that water, and we're constantly then putting it out into this channel. So the water that's in here on a daily basis is actually pretty clean. And you can check online, especially during the recreation zone, and we're standing in one of the rec areas. They do live water quality monitoring so that you know whether it's safe to get into the water or not, right? We're still thinking about public safety. Now, what I will say that links back to you bringing up storm surges, when you think about rain and you think about a rain event, that's capturing not only the water that's coming out of our toilets, it's capturing, all of the rain that's coming from all of the area around here. And so anything that's falling as a droplet of water within that watershed, within that bathtub, it then is coming over our rooftops, it's coming over our driveways that maybe have motor oil and gasoline on them, our roadways. It's picking up all of these different pollutants from our impervious surfaces here in the urban ecosystem. So those pollutants are then brought into the LA River, because in a storm event, they come out of the storm drains. There's over 2,200 storm drains that just outlet directly into the LA River. So that's untreated stormwater that's coming off of our impervious surfaces. So in a storm event, you will see that pollutant levels in the LA River do spike a bit, because again, we're pulling a lot of the pollutants that we unfortunately are emitting and having on, our flatland areas and in our urban ecosystem, then come down into this riparian ecosystem. So you do have to kind of watch, and we still do have a long way to go in terms
Check your local news.
Exactly, and in terms of figuring out how to better catch the stormwater that's coming off of these surfaces and treat it before or reuse it before then allowing it to come into a place like the river.
Many tourists come to Los Angeles to see the beautiful Hollywood sign, but we're actually here to talk about the river, but also the bridge that we're standing on. Can you share more about the bridge?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do love actually stopping here because it is super, super fun to come and watch a sunset and still be able to, again, see the Hollywood sign from a place along the river. But I love this place too because it's a way that we can cross over the river. There's not actually a lot of opportunities for us as people to even get across the river. So we talked earlier about how hard it is for wildlife to move around the city. Well, along the river and these kind of riparian corridors, we have a lot of accessibility up and down the sides of it, but we've only recently really been thinking about how do we get people across more easily. And so there's been actually a series of different bridges that have gone in over the past handful of years that have provided that accessibility. A lot of those bridges are coming out of master planning projects that have happened when we are re-looking at a place like the Los Angeles River and thinking about how can we revitalize something like this. And so in 2007, the city of Los Angeles actually issued a revitalization master plan for the Los Angeles River. And in that document, it looked at the first 31 miles of the river because that's where the river runs through the city of Los Angeles. And so they actually proposed over 240 different projects that hopefully would get funded and implemented over time. This bridge is one of those projects. So it's the great kind of example of like, yeah, way back in 2007, we were cooking up these ideas and we codified them in a plan. That's the first basic step to see change in an urban ecosystem. That plan and having that kind of this bridge be earmarked and say, okay, we want to, again, put a bridge in here so that we can connect Elysian Valley and Frogtown, then to Cypress Park and Glassell Park, be able to have that easy accessibility across there. Then it allows for politicians and for other folks to come up with the funding, and for then the designers to come up with the design, and for us to then actually build an improvement project like this. So yes, it takes time, but that kind of planning process is really important because then it allows for us to have these kind of improvements and get us a little bit closer to revitalizing the Los Angeles River and being able to better connect us as humans to a place like this.
I think this kind of encourages like green education for outdoor recreational use. But one of the things that you were saying is the amount of money it costed the city to pay this bridge. Originally, it was only a certain millions of dollars and then it expanded.
Yeah, it definitely is one of those things where we have to think about inflation of where the longer the projects take, the higher costs in terms of construction and contracting and those types of things, they'll end up inflating, right? So something that, again, might be designed 20 years ago, you know, more around $5 million or something like that, in the course of 20 years of it taking to be designed, permitted, actually stamped, approved, and starting to be constructed, then you see that, you know, rate elevate multiple times above what it's earmarked at the onset. So it comes in with these challenges of then figuring out, well, how then do you get more money to then be able to actually implement that project? So that's why I say it's nice to be patient with public projects, but it's also important to kind of make sure that they are moving along so that you don't have that issue where you run out of the appropriate amount of money that then is required to do these kind of infrastructural improvement projects.
Yeah, and like this bridge isn't the end for the projects that want to be expanded in the LA River. In fact, there's actually a park that's soon to be built on this side.
Yeah, so right over here, this is part of actually the 100-acre partnership. So it's a great, we've been talking about connectivity and about connectivity for wildlife as well as people. This is a great gem and jewel that has been left in our city as open space. It used to be an active rail yard. Then when it was decommissioned in the 90s, the California State Parks and the city started to purchase different parcels of it. Now collectively, the city and the state of California, they own contiguous 100 acres together that's on this east bank of the LA River. So again, if we're looking at these ecosystems, we're seeing Elysian Park over here as a key patch habitat. We've been looking again at the Verdugos at Mount Washington, at the San Gabriel Mountains, seeing those as other key patch habitats. This, of this 100 acres, is another great stepping stone in between those larger mountain ranges to give plants, animals, and us as people a little bit of a nature connection. So it's great. I'm excited that, California State Parks and the City of Los Angeles have been working together to figure out how to take these post-industrial landscapes and turn them into publicly accessible parkland. And I'm really excited to see that move forward in the, coming future.
Urban ecology is one of the most fascinating subjects that I was able to learn today with you. And one of the things I kind of wanted to ask you is, in academia and institutions, there's often this misconception that the types of ecologists are those who study rainforests, desert areas, often where there's limited amount of communities in those areas. And I kind of wanted to ask you, what has been your relationship and experiences with urban ecologists? Do you find that ecologists really struggle to validate urban ecology work?
Well, I will have to say that in the course of my studying as a student as well as now career as a professional in urban ecology, I have seen a tremendous shift towards what I think is a positive direction of really being a more inclusive profession, of where, we back in the day were thinking of ecosystems and environments as historically these pristine environments, and that's where a lot of us who were caring to save the planet and getting degrees in science were focusing our attention and our resources and our time. But we have really broadened the understanding of, wow, our Earth has a lot of different environments, city ones included, and we really need to actually envelop those in the work that we're doing as ecologists. So, even in the 10 years that I've been living in and working in a place like Los Angeles, it's been great to see how much the profession has shifted, of where I almost have felt like I'm kind of a pioneer trudging forward and kind of blazing this new path with others who are working in, the urban ecosystem. But it's been great to see that even over the decade of me working here, how many more people are knowing about urban ecology, they're interested in urban ecology, and they're seeing the value in that kind of perspective where you're able to integrate all of these different systems together to come up with solutions for some of the challenges that we're faced with.
And I think one of the most beautiful things about urban ecology is that, you were saying it connects humans, culture, animal species, and the future of our planet. And one of the things I've been taking away from this is that we do not need to be urban ecologists here trying to save the LA River either. As young people in this environmental movement, there's different ways that urban ecologists interact. And that can easily look like from planting seeds, like you mentioned, from being able to identify local plants in your area. I think a lot of young people often think, I need to get into governmental policy, and that's how the real change makes it. But you go against that and saying, yes, it is true. We do need the systemic and policy side, but we also need individuals to reactivate themselves, to reconnect to their urban environment.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I love most about urban ecosystems and about the concept of urban ecology is that really it is kind of like a come one, come all of what is it that you're passionate about and interested in? What are you good at? And what do you want to gift out to the world? Well, guess what? You can do that in a city, and you can do it in a way that's very mindful of the context that you're in that city. Meaning, if you're an artist, you could be involved in urban ecology by helping to communicate through your artwork things about the urban ecosystem. Or again, you could be on maybe the far side of that spectrum and thinking about, all right, I'm going to put on my business suit and my tie and I'm going to go into City Hall and I am going to create the policies and the plans and the reports that then have that kind of top-down approach. So there really is a giant spectrum of different ways that people can get involved in urban ecosystems and in the enhancement of them. And again, it's really up to the individual to figure out what resonates with me. What ecosystem am I in, and what even sub-ecosystem? I mean, I can talk broadly about LA's urban ecosystem, but then we're sitting in a riparian ecosystem here, the LA River ecosystem. I can even then take it down to my own yard and the ecosystem at my house, whether even it's just a balcony. We can find these areas of nature in very, very small instances, but also in very big kind of contexts. And so it's a great ability for us to, again, participate in, helping to change the future of the planet, helping to address things like the climate crisis, but in our own lives, doing what it is that we love to do.
You really restored a lot of magic for me about seeing my relationship with the LA River as someone who grew up here and not really thinking much other than it's contaminated and I should stay away from it. And I think this kind of showcases the power of collaboration, of that you were able to really teach me as an urban ecologist of yes, here's the methodologies, here are the frameworks, but here's actually what you don't know about the LA River. And so For a lot of young people that are watching this video, what is your vision of the future of LA River? What do you hope that it would look like in the upcoming decades?
What's interesting is that I do get this question a lot, and I think a lot of times people are kind of like baiting me and they think, oh, well, again, you're trained in ecology, so you're just gonna say, well, I want it to look like a real river again. I actually love the fact, and the thing that really magnetized me to move across the country to LA, to be with the LA River and to help revitalize it, was the fact that we can't erase the concrete 100%. We, again, would have to get rid of Los Angeles if we were to do something that bold. So we will always have that great juxtaposition of seeing the built and the natural, the us and the others. And it's that ability to visually always see that, oh, that we are a part of nature and that nature is a part of us. And we need to think about that as more of a connected system and a connective kind of community. I think, again, I would love to see in the future more of the ecological life and function and health brought back to the Los Angeles River. But at the same time, I don't want to lose the us from it. I don't want to lose the people part of it. I love what the concrete looks like in certain areas. Would I love to see different plants popping out of it? Heck yes. But do I want to see all of it erased? No, because I want us to remember that we are, again, a part of these ecosystems, and we can and should be a part of them. And it doesn't necessarily mean that us being involved in these urban ecosystems necessarily then leads to bad things. So my hope would, again, be that we as humans recognize that if we could do something as drastic as channelizing a 51-mile long, concrete waterway now and really reshaping Mother Nature, well, then we have the ability to actually reshape that infrastructural system into something that, again, is beautiful and very functional for the environment as well as for us. So we're smart enough to do that. We just have to have the belief that we can do it. And that's what I'm really excited to help encourage as many people as possible to get out into the environments that they're living within, to find those places, find those opportunity areas, and to have that belief and that positivity and that hope that they can use, again, their skills, their expertise, their ingenuity and excitement to help reshape those ecosystems into places that, again, are more symbiotic, places that we can live in and plants and other animals can coexist in as well.
Yeah, and it's like opening up your corridors of your own heart to reshape that connectionship with the land and ecology.
Yep.
And so for anyone that watches this video, I think many of us can now take active stance that we do want to be an urban ecologist. I am an urban ecologist now after learning so much from you. And I think those are the things that we often think about. It's like, you don't need a title sometimes. It's the actions and the embodiment is what makes you an urban ecologist.
Yep, exactly.